Liz party.
So the iMore Show is brought to you today by SoftLayer. SoftLayer is an IBM company, and they're all about your business applications and computational workloads, and they're unique, so you deserve a cloud resource that meets your unique needs. SoftLayer is the only cloud provider that provides dedicated servers and virtual servers, otherwise known as the public cloud, from a single seamless platform. SoftLayer is what is used by IBM and all of its cloud infrastructure foundation for all IBM cloud products. To learn more and to get the opportunity to get $500 of cloud infrastructure, that's $500 of cloud you can put in your pocket. Visit softlayer.com/podcast. It is November 2, 2015, and primarily today we are going to be talking all about the brand new Apple TV. This is the iMore Show. Joining me today, as always, in her newly greatly lit office. How are you, Serenity Caldwell?
Hi, I am good. I have clip lights now.
So great.
I'll have hues in them. It will be great.
Yeah. So just for everyone joining us, you're not still in Halloween costume, right? You didn't transition from Jack Harkness to Amy Pond?
No. Oh God. No. Actually,
okay.
This is sometimes people think this is an Enterprise sweater. I guess because it has the blue.
You could totally pull off Command Rank.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going for a month of Halloween costumes. Although slightly better, my boyfriend had 3 different Halloween costumes on Halloween, which was pretty great. So I have to rival that. I have to
I only saw the Wookiee to Who transition.
The Wookiee to Who, and then at a certain point during the Halloween party, he became Don Draper because he took off the overcoat and took off the 3D glasses, and then we gave him a tumbler. We're like, all right, now you're Don Draper.
Oh, that is fantastic.
Don Draper in Chucks, but still.
I went cleverly as an Apple Store.
Oh, that's good. I approve. Were you in Cupertino on Halloween?
Yes. Actually, I was, and the WYZ bar or something. They had Frankenstein at the door, and it was.
That's awesome.
Those people party for Halloween. I guess all that Silicon Valley money's got to go somewhere.
You know what? I like the Halloween party. Especially in our neighborhood, we just don't get kids. I guess they all either go to different neighborhoods or we just don't have children in our neighborhood. So it's really nice to be able to go and I love seeing people's costumes. All of my friends are nerdy dorks. So all of the costumes this year are great. Someone went as Pizza Rat and someone went on as the Piñata of Donald Trump, which I thought was great.
Now, do you not have kids, or do you have a new investigation for Mr. Harkness and Mr. Who?
Oh, that's true. That's true. We could investigate the secret of the missing kids in the suburban neighborhood.
So part of the reason that Serenity and I are talking about so much TV is that we've been watching so much TV thanks to the new Apple TV.
So much TV. Oh my gosh. It's so nice. Of course, I've had a dev kit for a while and I haven't talked about it because, dev kit, NDA. But the dev kit did not have the Apple Store until the latest OS rolled out when the Apple TVs rolled out. So now I'm able to appreciate all of the non-iTunes content like Hulu and Netflix. And oh man, there's so much television.
So for people who don't know, how do you go if you still have a dev kit and you haven't got the App Store yet? What do you do?
Yes. Okay. So if you want to upgrade your dev kit, you have to do a software update via developer.apple.com. I did mine via ipsw.me. I think that's a really awesome site that collects all of the software updates in a handy list. But you should be able to go through developer.apple.com, grab that 9.0 official GM, non-developer GM, and then connect your Apple TV via USB to USB-C to your computer and run that update. And once you finish running that update, you'll have to unfortunately restore, so you won't be able to keep anything that you were working on during the dev period. Your test flight will reset, or the apps that you currently have, you can re-download them from test flight. But you install that, you restore your Apple TV, and then you get the App Store and all of the other awesome things from the shipping version.
Everything that consumers get and more.
Yep. It's great.
So setup, let's talk setup for a minute. So setup is like the entire Apple TV to me. And I think it comes down to, it feels like it's 3.5 years coming, but the version we got is very recent. Like this is not the box they've been working on for 3 years. And it shows right away when you start to set it up, because you have the brilliance of tap to set up, but you also immediately then have to try to enter your Netflix ID.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Like you said, I think that there are parts of this Apple TV that are 3 years in the making. And then there are parts of this where it was clearly like, oh, we want to do something different. We have 6 months to input this all. So you get things like when you first set up the Apple TV, you've got tap to set up with your iOS device, which is magical, which is basically you just unlock your iOS device and hold it near your Apple TV, and then you can enter everything in on your Apple device for the initial setup. So you don't have to worry about entering your Wi-Fi password. It grabs it from the iPhone. You don't have to, you only have to enter in your Apple ID once, and you have to do it on the iPhone, and then it's all set up, which is awesome. But the second that you start entering anything else, say the first time you go to download an app, you'll get prompted for your App Store password. Or when you start opening things like Hulu and Netflix and all of that, those require you to use the on-screen keyboard because there's not yet an update for remote.app. And for some unexplainable reason, Apple has decided to remove Bluetooth keyboard support from the latest Apple.
Okay,
TV.
so there's a lot to unpack. Let's unpack some of that.
Yeah.
So some of it, like, so there are reasons for all of these things, and I'd like to help explain them, not to apologize for them, because like I think some of the reasons are wrong. So, but I think it's good to like explain reasons for these things. So one of the things for the Bluetooth keyboard is that almost nobody used it, and of the people who almost nobody used it, almost all of them were developers. So that leads them to think it's not a high priority. So like almost no one in the real world is using it. It's not a priority for us to put in there. Conversely, the people who do have it get frustrated because they no longer have it. And also there's something to be said for the ability to do gaming, for example, with a keyboard, the way PC gamers have been doing for years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, I understand the concept of not wanting people to game with a keyboard on your television because very few PC gamers or very few gamers for television actually game with a keyboard. But it is frustrating to, especially that there's no update for the remote app. I think that's the big kicker here. And I understand why, because that's a big update that they have to do. They have to update it for the phone. They have to update it for the watch. They have to do like a pretty big overhaul to get it to communicate with the new Apple TV software. Unfortunately, it's kind of necessary.
Yeah, it's both understandable and unacceptable because they have, yes, they don't have, so the Siri remote is this whole other story, but duplicating the features of the Siri remote is non-trivial because now instead of just up, down, left, right remote with a couple of buttons, you have the ability to do Siri. So the remote app, in a perfect world, if you don't have your Siri remote and you only have the remote app, it should be able to transit Siri. Also, the remote app was not very good at direct manipulation. It was sort of, oh, I went too far. Oh, I went not far enough. And the Siri remote really nails it. And they don't want, at least my understanding is they don't want anything that gives a terrible experience when compared to the Siri remote. And the Siri remote took a long time to get right. It was an awful amount of work to get right. And I understand that, they really want to make a good version of the remote app, but I just wish that they were really wanting to make a good version of the remote app starting 6 months ago.
I don't understand why they don't just do a photos.app version where it's just the like, all we're going to release for remote app is a wireless keyboard. Or design the Apple TV in such a way that if you have your iPhone unlocked and you check a box that says punt to iPhone, anytime a box pops up that's like entering your password, it asks you on your iPhone, would you like to enter this password on your iPhone?
Or just Touch ID. I don't know. I'm saying this as someone who has no idea whether you can securely transit Touch ID over wireless. I would just love to Touch ID all these things.
I know. That was actually I wrote a story on things that I'm a little I want to see in the next version of the Apple TV or the next version of the software. And a lot of people wrote in the comments that they wanted a Touch ID sensor on their Siri remote, which is interesting to me, in part because it shows how widespread Touch ID has become in such a short period of time. Where it went from people being like fingerprinting to now it's like, no, I need it. It's so easy.
Yeah.
But yeah. The swipe to type is, oh my God, it's better than the old remote. It is.
Oh, and your keyboard tricks saved me. I wasn't aware of those, and your keyboard tricks saved me. Maybe you want to explain what they are, but your keyboard tricks were awesome.
Yeah, so there are some keyboard tricks, I should say. So you're stuck entering it in line by line, which is unfortunate. But there are some cool little nifty keyboard tricks that the TVOS developer or the TVOS team built into the software, including if you, as you're going through the keyboard, if you press the play pause button, you can instantly switch between lowercase and uppercase letters. That trick is awesome. If you press and hold on any of the letters, you can get its lowercase version if you're in uppercase, or uppercase version if you're in lowercase, as well as any special characters. So if for whatever reason you have an accent aigu on your E in one of your passwords or your email address.
Standing right here, man.
Shh. And also, Apple has created a recents menu, which is so awesome. That if when you're typing email addresses or search queries, it remembers what you've done for the last like 5 or 10 or so. So if you constantly switch between multiple addresses, it actually stores those. So I have like my Apple ID and
Mhm.
then also my secondary ID that I use for pretty much all of my Netflix and Hulu logins and all of that. So I'm able to like I don't have to type and my email addresses are a little weird. Like there are Y's in my email addresses. So being able to just select that and only have to worry about typing in the password is nice. That said, line by line password is painful.
Yeah.
Although I will give a shout out. There are some third party apps that are doing this really smartly. I think Hulu does this. The Twitter client that I was testing does this. There are a couple of companies, especially the ones that already have two-factor authentication built in, where they're like, okay, two-factor is going to be weird and complicated and not possible on an Apple TV. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to show you a code on screen and you have to go on your iPhone or on your computer, go to a website, enter in this code. And once you've entered in that code, that creates a secure link between the television and your phone where you can then enter in all of your credentials. You can do your two-factor authentication on the computer or the phone. And then once you're finished with that, that gives you a second code that you can then put in the television. And that, again, still a little clunky, but so much better than let's try and enter 2 passwords and then two-factor authentication and then numbers. And then you're crying and switching your password to password because it's easy.
123. That's all my passwords right now.
Yeah.
123. And there's no WebKit, so you can't even do OAuth, like clever OAuth chicanery either.
No, it's very frustrating.
And
And
also the frustrating thing, like you mentioned that like you can have multiple accounts. So you can set up your Apple ID and you can set up your boyfriend's or your girlfriend's or whomever's, but you can't have multiple Game Center accounts.
that's what's so weird to me because they have the support for multiple accounts in there for purchasing, which is something that the previous Apple TV had as well. But there's no way to even log multiple Game Center accounts. Like I could understand if multiplayer Game Center trying to log in with multiple Game Center accounts at once would be a little bit challenging because I mean that's something that Xbox only kind of tackled fairly recently with Gold subscription. But even having like being able to store multiple accounts the way that you are on the with App Store purchases where you have like Apple ID A, Apple ID B, Apple ID C, and then you can select one of those at any time. Game Center literally just allows you to store one account.
Yeah.
And that stinks. That really, really stinks. As especially, I've had the box for about 4 days now with the shipping version of TVOS, and the games are good. Like I'm really I got sucked into Rayman Adventures like a crazy person, and that's a game that just didn't interest me on the phone.
Yeah.
But on the TV, it reminds me of a Sega game. Like it's totally it's a Sonic the Hedgehog type thing, and the games are so good. The game like they Alto's Adventure is on the Apple TV right now, and if you've never played that, A, it's awesome. B, it's even more awesome on a television.
Truth.
Although
Truth things.
I'm trying to get them. They have a dedicated wingsuit button, which I'm like, this is awesome, but I want it to be a trigger and not the B button because A is to jump and then you have to slide it to do the win.
Yeah,
Anyway,
so that's another thing. So as we're going through points of contention, originally Apple announced that you could use game controllers and that was it. But then late in the cycle, they flipped that around and said you have to support the Siri remote, but you can also support game controllers. And this is for customer satisfaction reasons because Apple's not making a game controller. They're not packaging a game controller. So a lot of people will just buy an Apple TV and just have the Siri remote and they might download a game, even if they're warned not to, they might download a game and then not be able to control it. And
and
that's the
then get
problem.
mad.
Yeah, but at the same time, it means that you can't make game like all your games are slave to that Siri remote in one way or another.
So I actually think that there's a pretty easy, I mean, it's not easy way to get around it, but the one like I appreciate that Apple is going from a perspective of we want all of the games to be accessible to everyone because I think that's important. And the Siri remote when holding landscape version does have quite a few buttons available to it, so it's not completely you can have the difference between tapping and clicking on the touchpad. You can tap on different areas of the touchpad to signify different things. So it's not the end of the world to create limited functionality, and there's nothing in Apple's thing that says every single bit of functionality has to like you have to the game has to be playable, but it could be very easily like you have access to just, it reminds me kind of like the old arcade games where it's like there are more button combos available, but unless you had the right button combo
The
layout,
turbo controller.
yeah, exactly, you wouldn't be able to access them. You're just kind of like, well, I know these combos exist, I it's not going to work for me. So I right now I think the game controller, the way that people are porting it is fairly limited. They're just using the D-pad and the four buttons. But I could very easily see people. The game controller in TVOS is called the extended controller layout, um, and that gives you quite a few options for mapping certain things to certain things. So I'm hopeful the game developers will figure out a way to basically build in limited support via remote, and then actually take advantage of the game controller to its fullest extent, because I really like playing with the game controller. I really enjoy it. I will say some apps, even though they technically support the game controller, and all apps technically support
Mhm.
the game controller because it's mapped. Some of the buttons are mapped to the same thing as the Siri remote. But for the apps that haven't actually been optimized to take advantage of the game controller, it can be a little wonky. You can get a little bit of delays. And I was trying to play Almost Impossible with my game controller, which was almost impossible to play.
It's such a conundrum, and
Yeah.
we're not going to complain the entire show about the thing, but there are
No,
certain
no.
things that we need to complain about. And another one is that you can only have one Siri remote, which is not intuitive to people who are used to the Wii games, where you had up to 4 Wiimotes, and then you can have up to 2 MiFi made for Apple. I don't know why the I is still there. Made for Apple TV remote game pads, but only 2. And people are used to having 4 of them on a PlayStation or an Xbox. And then you can use your iOS device to remote control, but the app has to be specifically like, it has to be like the version of Crossy Roads on the iPhone controlling the version of Crossy Roads on the Apple TV. So it is non-trivial from a comprehension point of view.
Yeah, there are a bunch of weird sort of, and I've got to assume that part of that is hardware and part of that is just software running up against limits. Where it's not even 2 MFI controllers, it's 2 MFI devices. So if you want Bluetooth headphones, in addition to that, you can only have one controller and a pair of Bluetooth headphones, which is kind of a bummer.
Mhm.
I I'm really hoping that this is just a we ran out of time
Yeah.
limitation and not a hardware limitation, because again, Apple was encouraging 4-player multiplayer game development. So I've got to assume that they're aware of this problem and being like, yeah, we know it's not the best, but we're
Yeah.
going to fix
Well,
it.
that's why I said it's like it's a product that is both late to the market, or late coming, because it took them a long time, through what, 2.5, 3 years to get it out. But
But at the same
also,
time,
it's a recent product they're trying to get out as fast as possible.
yeah, I mean, this is, and there's, we've also talked, of course, about Apple potentially having sort of a slightly different flavor of tvOS that they wanted to ship with, which was their sort of subscription service, and that got shelved for various reasons, including discussions. And now we have tvOS that looks a little bit more like the previous generation of the Apple TV, with Apple. And I mean, I don't know if that contributes to it in some way, but it's obvious to me that like some of these things were definitely rushed out the door. And that's no insult to the tvOS team, because I think they've done a lot of things well.
It's
I was
terrific.
Yeah, I was saying before the show, I'm like, I kind of feel bad for the tvOS team, because I feel like what they're getting off the bat, everybody's getting their Apple TVs and being like, what is wrong? And overlooking the fact that like if I had to rate the Apple TV on a scale of like 0 to 100, with 100 being like the best, awesome, couldn't live without it in my life, it would score like an 85, 87 right now. Like, it is pretty darn good. The games are great. We'll talk about discoverability in a second, but there are a lot of good apps on launch, which I was really impressed by. I wasn't sure the quality of what we would get per se. The TV watching experience is
All right, well,
flawless.
hold that thought. I'm going to do an
Yeah.
ad, and then
Okay.
we will talk about all the good things.
All right. We'll talk about the good things after the ad.
All right, so this episode is brought to you by lynda.com, the online learning platform with over 3,000 on-demand video courses to help you strengthen your business, technology, and creative skills. What is lynda.com? It is for problem solvers, for the curious, people who want to make things happen. Maybe you want to master Office. Maybe you want to learn negotiation tactics, build a website, boost your Photoshop skills, learn all about Logic or Audition or anything. Lynda.com is there to feed your curious mind. So it's hard to explain, but basically it's like a learning in virtual environment delivered right to you in the way you want, when you want, and how best that you learn. And there's a bunch of great stuff. I was talking recently, last year I did the Logic stuff because I was moving from GarageBand to Logic. This year I've been doing a bunch of photography stuff. So when Serenity says, hey, just put it in manual mode and shoot, I can actually know what that means and not just flub around with the automatic button and have big bright whites everywhere. And it's been really helpful because I'm very pressed for time, and I must admit I don't take the full courses. I just go and look up the questions I have, find the answers, and get on with things. And that's the nice thing about Lynda. You can watch and learn from top experts. They're passionate about teaching. They stream thousands of video courses on demand, so you can learn at your own schedule. You can learn at your own pace. The courses are structured so you can watch them from start to finish or consume them in little bite-sized pieces. You can browse each course transcript and follow along. You can search for an answer and skip to that point. You can take notes and refer to them later. You can download them so you can watch them on your iPhone, your iPad, your Android device. You can create and save playlists of the courses you want to watch. It's remarkable. It is the closest thing to jacking straight into the Matrix and learning Kung Fu and or helicopter flying. Hope you get that reference. Your lynda.com membership will give you unlimited access to training on hundreds of topics, all for one flat rate. Whether you're looking to become an industry expert, you're passionate about your hobby, or you just want to learn something new, I want you to go to lynda.com/iMore and sign up for your free 10-day trial. You heard me right. Free 10 days. What could be better than that? lynda.com/iMore. lynda.com/IMORE. Thank you, Lynda. All right, so now that we've raised, there is a lot to love on this thing. Right from the beginning, right when you start using Siri or you start using the Focus UI, it is brilliant from a design point of view.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely agree. I think that the design improvements that they've made between the 3rd generation and the 4th generation have been fantastic. I really love the lighter theme. I love Focus, like you were saying. The way that parallax is used to kind of highlight app icons as you're scrolling through them, and also the way it's used when you don't touch the remote for a little while, and then it quiets down and zooms in just on that app. So when you pick up the remote, you can see it.
And it feels so great too, because again, like it's not direct manipulation like on an iPhone or iPad where you're touching an object and it's one-to-one tracking you. And that creates the illusion that you're actually moving around all this virtual stuff. But it's not like a Mac where you have a mouse and a pointer and the magic trackpad is sort of intermediating that. This is trying to do the latter with the former's technology. It wants you to feel like you're directly manipulating it. And as you move your thumb slowly, it goes slowly. And you feel that icon just tilting a little bit, and then you snap to the next one. And then you go faster and you just it just feels like they did a really good job with it.
Yeah, I will say one thing that has wigged me out a little bit is that the mapping, the touch mapping on the remote is a little bit different and a little bit harkens to older eras, which is to say when you swipe right on an Apple TV, you are actually, you know, it's not natural, what we think of as natural scrolling.
Yeah, you're moving a pointer, you're not moving the space underneath it.
Exactly. You are, it's pull, I believe, as opposed to pushing something over. So you are pulling your cursor left and your invisible cursor. And I don't notice it except when I launch the multitasking screen. Because when you're just navigating icons, it doesn't feel that wacky. But when you launch the multitasking screen and you want to swipe up to to force quit an app,
destroy an app, that's brilliant.
Yeah, destroy an app, it's a reverse swipe. And that blew my mind for a second. I'm like, wait, what? But it's, again, I don't think you'll notice it 90% of the time, but that 10%, it definitely gets you into a little bit of a whoa. But I've been training on the natural scrolling for so long.
Also, I find the exact same thing with the hold down Siri button, because you don't hold it down on iOS. You press it, let go, and then talk.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that now that there's, yo there, Siri, so you don't have to worry about that. But you previously had to hold it down. So you pressed it and then you could talk. This, you hold it down, and I'm having like real awkwardness in getting that timing right. Like I'll hold it down and start talking, and I won't get the first word because I didn't wait for it to start, and I have no rhythm.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do think we've gotten a little bit spoiled with the 6S and even the 6 after iOS 9 because Siri has become so fast. There is a small delay between the holding the button down and Siri activating. I think that has to do with the fact that it's over a Bluetooth connection as opposed to being directly on device. And I assume, again, that's something that they're going to work to tighten up in future releases. But yeah, it's little bits that are.
And you can ask for anything. Like you just say, I want to watch, show me an action movie, show me new action movie, show new PG rated action. It's just the sequential inference in Siri is so clever because it doesn't just like, it gives you what you want, but then it helps you reduce the results set over and over again until you find exactly. And if you know already, you can say, just show me iZombie season 1, episode 2, and it'll go right to it. But if you, and the other thing that they did is, and this is, I don't know if this is an optimistic point of view, but they prioritize free. So if they know you already bought it on iTunes, they'll show you that first. If they know it's streaming on Netflix, it'll show you that next. But if you didn't buy it on iTunes, it'll switch and show you Netflix first because it knows you're subscribed to Netflix and that's the freer option. If you're not subscribed to Netflix, it'll show you that later because it wants you to know Netflix is there in case you want to sign up for it because there's enough stuff there that you think is of value. And I like the way that they handle all that.
Yeah, and it also it shows you it shows you results even if you don't have the app installed. So if something's available on Showtime, you'll see a little Showtime box, and if you click on it, it'll say, "Hey, you don't have this app installed. Would you like to go to the App Store and install it?" Which I think is really, really nice UI. I think that the prioritizing free is a really important aspect of this, where Apple is not trying to just push its own paid content. Yeah, exactly. No, it's not. It's really trying to get you to find the best result. It reminds me of Miracle on 34th Street, where it's like, yeah, we're going to send you to the department store across the street. If you want to, if we can't offer you the thing that you want at the right price, which I think is really cool. It reminds me a lot. There's a website online that has been priceless for me in recent years called Can I Stream It?
Yes.
Which it has a database of movies and television shows, and it lets you know what's available on streaming, what's available for rent, and what's just available on DVD. And Apple's done a really, really good job at kind of implementing most of those features. The one problem, of course, is that if there are movies that Apple doesn't have available on anything, it doesn't let you know. Like I was trying to look up Rogue Nation. I wasn't sure when the next Mission Impossible was going to be available for streaming, and it couldn't show me Rogue Nation. It didn't know what Rogue Nation was. It wouldn't even show me a trailer for it, which is kind of a bummer.
So that's similar to the latest. There's a little bit of mini controversy over Apple Music because people who chose not to renew their subscriptions, if they ask for things like top 10 lists, Siri's just saying, I don't know, you don't subscribe to Apple Music, and that's not Siri is not being mean to you. It's just that Apple tied a whole bunch of Siri features into Apple Music, and they probably shouldn't have. They probably should have made those abstract Siri services, or give you a web result, or there's just a lot of opportunities you can do rather than not answering a question.
Exactly. Well, it could also be, it could show you the playlist of top 10 and just be like, to play this playlist, subscribe to Apple Music. Yeah. That's the kind of good thing. Like what I would really hope for in a future version of TVOS is when you ask, like, show me the latest Mission Impossible movie. It shows this, and then it says, this movie will be available to rent on block on December 17th, 2015. Would you like to subscribe to notifications? So that when it's available to watch, you get a little pop-up on your television being like, yo, remember this thing that you were really excited about 2 months ago? It's available now.
Yo, Siri, over it. Oh, darn.
Yeah, but seriously.
No, that's true. And Siri only ties into Hulu, Netflix, Showtime, yeah, and iTunes, of course. So if you have a different service, especially internationally, Siri doesn't do much. Like it'll find apps, and there's no podcast app built in yet. So this is the thing I think also that it's worth explaining, that Siri isn't one thing. We often think like Siri is this universal service that sits on top of everything, and iPhone and iPad and Apple Watch and Apple TV all just access the same universal Siri pool, and it's not. It's very, very much separate little pools for good reasons and not so good reasons. And right now the Apple TV one is its own distinct pool of Siri results, so it doesn't give you everything that the iPhone does, and that can mess with your expectations too.
Yeah, I know when I first started it, I went immediately to music queries, and when that didn't work, I was like, what is going on?
Why?
Yeah, but you know what? I'm okay with this because I'd rather have a good limited Siri experience than a substandard wide Siri experience. Do I want to be able to control my HomeKit apps on Apple TV? Absolutely. Do I want to be able to call for Apple Music? Absolutely. Do I want Siri on the Apple TV to work more like Siri on my Apple Watch, where it just hands off things that it doesn't understand? Yes. But I think that when limitations come in and when time crunches come in, the Apple engineers have to make a decision of like, do we ship substandard thing or do we ship limited thing and then add on to it? If we look at something like Apple Music, to contrast, Apple Music shipped with a lot of stuff. Yeah. and a lot of it was unfinished. And as much as people complain about like, oh, this isn't here and this isn't here and this isn't here, I'd rather have the things not be here than have the things not work. Because in 6 months, at least my hope is in 6 months, we will, like, all the things that we were complaining about will all have been fixed with software updates, or at least vastly improved. Like, for people right now who are complaining if there's no remote app, does it suck? Yes. But I don't think the majority of consumers, the majority of users who want a new Apple TV are buying one on day one, being like, I need this new, this new thing.
Yeah, and they're also separate issues. Like passwords need to be fixed regardless of whether
they do.
and keyboards and stuff are there. That's something that needs to be solved. And those are ways of solving it, but the problem itself needs to be solved in ways that suit every consumer.
Correct. So I think these are definitely problems. But I think by the time that the majority of users who want an Apple TV upgrade to the newest Apple TV, we're going to see it being polished over. They needed to ship a 1.0 at the end of October, and they did that. And now the real work begins. Now the adjustment of like what features do we absolutely need to ship in the next TVOS update.
Yeah, and my horror story for the weekend is Apple. Most of the Canadian companies did not put out apps, and you'd think maybe Apple didn't work with them, but services like Show Me and Crave TV did put out apps. So I don't know what CTV and Global, and I'm sure this is true. I think the UK did a fairly good job, but just internationally, I'm sure it's true that a lot of countries didn't do a good job. So I came home to test out the AirPlay, and I started running Global's app. And at the very beginning, there was a 7-minute, really poorly filmed how to varnish your floor video. And after about a minute, you could skip it. But then it went to commercial, and it came back with another not really well produced how to cook something commercial how-to video, and then something with the car. And so every segment where there's usually a commercial, there was now one of these long form, not well executed how-to. And I was just perplexed, and I realized this is the industry that I'm dealing with here.
That's unfortunate. The international market has always been a bit of a tough, sticky wicket for Apple to tackle.
Well, that's why I'm happy with this box. Like a lot of people might have preferred the DVR box, or they might have preferred the over-the-top cable programming box. But this is the box I always wanted, because I knew I would never be able to benefit from any of the other services. And yeah, it'd be great if the US had them, but I just wanted Apple to ship, because it'd been years and years, and this box could have shipped incrementally intermittently while they were doing all the other stuff. And I'm just happy to have it now.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about this is because there are third-party apps available, and because tvOS is now an official OS alongside iOS and watchOS and OS 10, it will get more love than the old Apple TV did. Third-party app developers have chances to update at any time when they want to work on it. We were talking, a couple people have complained and questioned the lack of a podcasts app. Again, I think that's the same thing, running into time limitations. But the good news is Apple can ship a podcast app whenever they want. Again, does it kind of stink for people who are avid podcast listeners that there's no podcast app on the Apple TV? Yes. Although you can, if you want to listen to podcasts, you can get them through home sharing. If you turn on home sharing on your computer, there is a podcast section in home sharing in the little computer's icon on your 4th generation Apple TV. So there is a workaround there. And I'm
Twitch apps too if you just want the Twitch shows.
Yeah, that's true. So there are options. In the meantime, until Apple has the time to finish building this stuff out.
So
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I'm curious for your opinion on this, because it was funny, initially one of the big complaints is there's no 4K, and then everyone pointed out, well, there's no 4K content. And even companies that say they're streaming at 4K, well, that's what you get if you're lucky and the satellites align. Otherwise, you're getting closer to 2K. But now the complaint has shifted more to Apple's doing 1080p 60 frames per second, which is miraculous to me. It's miraculous that Apple snuck a 1080p 60 frame per second console into all these homes. But aficionados really want 24 frames per second. They want their movies in the frame rate that film, intended.
Yeah, so I'm conflicted because I love 24 frames per second. I've always hated the look of video. But at the same time, our televisions have been faking 24 frames per second for a long time. Now, a lot of televisions have it built in natively. But you can still, like, when you're watching your TV show, chances are you're not watching it in 60, and you're probably not even watching it technically in 30. What you're watching is 24 with a couple frames duplicated so that it fills the 30 requirement, but it still looks like 24. At least that's if I'm messing this up completely, someone who has more film knowledge than me, please correct me, because my digital film knowledge is like 7 years out of date at this point. But I believe that's how this is working right now. So it's not like it's not like you're watching like Arrow and it looks like it's a soap opera, right? Or it looks weird and high speed and uncomfortable. It just means that Apple TV offers that many frames available for you. Now, whether or not they're going to offer a dedicated 24p mode, I don't know. I would hope that they could. I think that's a software limitation and not a hardware limitation in terms of just offering different resolution scans to display at. The real problem with 24p is outside of video. So outside of your Hulu, your Netflix, stuff like that. Playing games at 24p kind of stinks. A lot of and you tell a gamer, sorry, you only get 24 FPS on your game, and they're like, what?
Yeah, they're building a PC faster than you can say hello.
Exactly. 60 frames per second is a lot, is a lot more friendly to gamers. And I think that's probably what Apple had in mind, because again, like the content right now is going to be about the same as what they were offering previously. And I think they can get away with basically fake 24 while they work on building better content and even offering their content provider option.
I'm going to do one more ad, then let's dive into content. Because the content stuff is really cool. So the iMore Show is brought to you today also by Red Hat, tried, tested, trusted, a little thing called the internet. At this point, everyone understands that in the right situations, open source software is important technology. It's useful and it's powerful. And I always point this out. iOS and OS 10 based on open source technology, the Mach kernel, BSD networking, all these great things. WebKit, Safari's rendering engine, open source. No one really disagrees with that. They just made Swift open source. The most successful open source project of all time is a little thing called the internet. Tim Berners-Lee put the World Wide Web together in the public domain. There's Berkeley Unix, TCP/IP, BSD Linux, Android. I think BSD Unix, Android, and the entire Internet of Things. You get the picture. The only reason that people disagree about it is they don't know how to use it all the time in enterprise, because enterprise is typically these big proprietary setups by these monolithic companies that come with these giant service contracts, because the software seldom if ever works and they need these giant service contracts. Red Hat is doing it differently. They've been settling this debate one customer at a time for over a decade. They started with Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and today they certify and support application development, storage, and cloud infrastructure for every conceivable enterprise deployment. The New York Stock Exchange, DreamWorks, each and every airline, healthcare company, the telecom giants, the Fortune Global 500, they all rely on Red Hat. In fact, more than 90% of all companies in the Fortune 500 are all Red Hat customers. Why? Because they get powerful, constantly improving innovation of open source software without the risk of having to do it all alone. It's that simple. Red Hat, enterprise software trusted in the world's most demanding data centers. Find out why at redhat.com. Thank you, Red Hat. So content, Red. One of the things that was so interesting to me is that when the App Store debuted, there weren't really enough apps for them to do categories, for them to do top lists. So we were left with featured purchased, which showed you apps that are universal purchases, not universal binaries, universal purchases, separate binary, but linked together so you don't have to buy them more than once. And then search, and we've talked about sort of the search inputs before. People could do the old TVML stuff, which is the TV markup language that uses sort of like JSON to make what you had on the old Apple TV. So if you just wanted to get your TV app up quickly, you could do that. Or you could build full-on iOS-style apps for TVOS. I was still pleasantly surprised, not just with the quantity of apps, but the quality of some of the early ones.
Absolutely. I feel kind of bad because I was describing some of the apps as ports, which is not really necessarily technically true. Where it's like, we've got Alta's Adventure on the Apple TV, of course, which has been on iOS for a long time, and Smool Sing app, which is a karaoke app, which has been on iOS for a long time. And they both have Apple TV versions, but they're not strict. Like, it's not just that they copy pasted code and yay, it automatically works now. It's that they actually spent the time to all right, we're taking the majority of our iOS code and then we're framing it in an Apple TV context, and we're doing things to make the Apple TV experience as awesome as possible. And I was pleasantly surprised. I think the games look fantastic. Some of the kitchen, I've looked at some kitchen tutorials because I really love that. My TV, our living room and our kitchen is connected, so it's really nice.
Mine's the same. It's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. The content apps, of course, are great. Which that's no surprise. That's probably something Apple mandated
So
pretty
I was
early
worried.
on.
Yeah, I was worried that because previously with TVML, everything was a template. So they were all incredibly
Yeah.
consistent. If you could use one, you could use them all. But theoretically now people can do almost anything. And I was worried that it would be almost like Newsstand, where I would open up something and just not know how to use it. But more or less, they've all been the utility is all consistent, even if each of them has its own interesting features.
Yeah, I will give Apple a sort of big hooray for this because I think their human interface guidelines, which they have up on their developer portal, if anybody wants to look at them, they're very consistent and very much like, yes, you have the freedom to do anything, but if you're building this type of app, here's what you should probably have, and here's how your app should work to be accessible to the most amount of users. And that I think gave people an informal template to work with, especially when it came to content apps versus things like games, which have a little bit more flexibility and freedom in terms of what they look like. But I appreciate that from Apple. They've been doing a really stellar job with their human interface booklets lately, and I think it's turned out some really fantastic apps, especially when people, not everybody had access to the dev kits.
Yeah. And they've gotten much better about priority. Like a couple of years ago, design was almost not seen at WWDC, and there was one design evangelist, and it was just a huge job. And Apple's really been doubling and tripling down on all that stuff. And like with the watch, they had videos up that showed you sort of best practices, and they're doing similar stuff now with the TV. And I think it really shows in the quality of apps that are shipping.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do want to say one thing. This is another niggle that I had with the Apple TV is that discoverability on the App Store right now is unfortunately terrible. And I'm not sure if this is just Apple had a hard time launching the App Store on day one, and these categories are, the category tabs are going to appear.
Well, no, they
soon,
will. So
but
it's like some categories had like one app, and they just didn't want to push them live when there was nothing to fill them.
but the original, the iPhone 3G had one app in certain categories, and no one complained then. And I really don't think anybody's going to complain now because there are a lot of apps. And the problem is like a lot of those apps are getting shafted right now.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that all of those apps are top tier, amazing quality and they absolutely need to be, featured, but they should be discoverable. And right now, the only way to find an app is either to know its specific name or type in letter by letter to try and search, or number by number to try and search the App Store. And that is
Which we did for you, and that was ridiculous.
We did. Yeah, exactly. We made a video, and if we tried to type it out, it would have been too long because there are a lot of apps in there. The App Store I probably has 1,000 or 2 apps at launch, which is pretty awesome for a brand new device that's in the living room, and people aren't really sure how often they're going to actually use apps. But it really bums me out. All of these app developers have been working so hard, and probably it's a decent chunk of time to port an Apple, not even port, but to build an Apple TV app, whether that's taking code from your iOS app or doing something entirely new. And the fact that these apps, aside from the stuff on the features page, aren't discoverable. And moreover, there's no way to view them outside of the Apple TV store. There's no way to link to them. James Thompson of pCalc did a really a funny thing where he's like, yeah, the only way I can show you that my app is available on the App Store is I'm going to take a screenshot of searching on the App Store and showing that pCalc shows up if you search for PC.
Yeah.
That is lame. Sorry, Apple. That's lame. It really should. Again, we're talking about handoff and something that, a process that Apple has really perfected in recent years. The fact that there's no handoff on the Apple TV, that there's no way, even the Mac App Store even has pages. Even if you're not viewing it on a Mac, if you're viewing a Mac app on iOS, it has just a standard web page that's like, here's this app, open in the Mac App Store. If you're on an iOS device, at least here is a link to the app so that you can read about it. And even if you can't buy it on that particular device, and I don't understand why that's not available for the Apple TV. It seems like such a major, not a misstep, but such a major omission to me.
No, again, like there's reasons for all this stuff, but some of those reasons just make you disagree with them more.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm sure. Like I don't think that this was Apple not thinking about it. I think Apple made a conscious decision saying we're not going to do this. We're not going to ship categories at start because of X, Y, and Z. I just don't agree with it. I think it's really it stinks for developers to have worked hard for 2 to 3 months and then not be able to link to their app. like not be able to send people to their app other than saying, hey, if you search blah, 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 like even Apple, even add to wish list so that you could find it later. If you're browsing on something else, it would just be so helpful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there is so much really attentive thought to detail here. Like when you say who is in this, you get like these, you not only get lists of the other movies they made, but you get little, almost like iOS style avatars of the faces of the actors.
So good.
And it's like Control Center where you can swipe up and the little arrow comes up and it gives you even more information, and it's layered on top so you don't lose your, like one of the things in the old Apple TV was menu up, menu up, menu up, menu up, menu down, menu down, menu down, menu down, menu up, 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 up,
Yep.
down, down. And you were forever, like there was no preserving your state or location. And this, I'm watching one thing, I ask about something else, I go, I press the menu button, I'm right back where I was. And there's so many really thoughtful things. And I think we're getting kind of Syracuse here where we're complaining because it's so close to being exactly what we want that those other things are just like standing out for us.
Well, exactly. They've done so many things well. You were talking about Control Center. One of the things that I really love in the new Apple TV is the pull down when you're watching a video, which has instant access to turning closed captioning on or off, as well as switching language tracks if the movie you're watching or TV show you're watching has multiple languages. And it also allows, that's a place to quick switch AirPlay. Which is a cool thing. I don't think many people realize, but the Apple TV is built in to automatically AirPlay its system audio to anything that it can connect to. So your system speakers as your Apple TV can constantly be AirPlaying to another device. And I think this was probably put in as sorry, we had to take out digital out, but if you have an Airport Express, you can hook up your AV receiver to it, and then you can just AirPlay like that. And it will theoretically work without lag. I need to test it today. But that's like having that readily accessible and also just adding that in. I think it's a really nice addition.
I look at it like this is an incredibly, incredibly good foundation to build stuff on. Yeah, more apps are going to come, and Apple's going to do. Someone just tweeted to us while we were talking here. Ali Reza said that he sees the podcast app on Apple Demo. So obviously that's incoming soon, if not, not immediately. So there's so much opportunity for them to fill this out, but also for developers to really run with it. Like we already saw, I forget the name, the yoga app that uses
Dova, yeah.
Yeah, it uses your Apple Watch and then displays your heart rate on the screen. And we start thinking about all the stuff you have, not just in your living room, but in education or in meetings when someone has an Apple TV and then all your iOS devices and your watches and everything interacts with that. It could be just such a powerful platform.
Yes, absolutely. I think this is, again, it's a solid 1.0. I think it's not ready for everybody just yet straight out of the box. I think it probably will be by the holidays, if not by next year. This is their first sort of entry of Apple moving from a hobby product to a full featured thing. Is it 100% polished or finished? No. But if we look at sort of the history of how Apple has been shipping brand new devices lately, they haven't been shipping them polished or finished. And actually, in a way, like part of me is frustrated by that, but part of me actually likes it from a perspective of Apple isn't, maybe this is just me trying to apologize for Apple, but it seems to me that Apple is intentionally shipping some things, not necessarily underfinished, but choosing not to implement certain things and then listening to audience reaction and be like, okay, what do we need to prioritize so that we can make this really great? Rather than spending 6 more months working on something, prioritizing like crazy features and then shipping it and having audiences react to a completely different aspect and just be like, no, but I wanted this and I don't care about this. Why did they spend so much time on this? So I almost wonder if it's not, if their intention, like I felt like this with the Apple Watch to a great deal, where I almost wonder if it's almost like not necessarily a public beta test, but let's put this product out. Let's hear what people have to say, and then let's address their complaints with software updates.
The iPad was very much like that too. Like the first gen iPad, it was clear that nobody, including Apple, really knew what it meant. And then over the course of the year, that let them come out with the iPad 2, which was as close to we've had with a slam dunk of any second generation product. And I think you're absolutely right. This is sort of in that track. It has enough that you can do the staples. You can, your TV, your movies, your apps, your games, they're all there. But within 6 months to a year, they'll see how everyone is using it. And Apple has really good stats on this kind of stuff, and then they'll slowly massage it into being. And I think we'll see that with the watch in a year or 2 years too. The stuff that's not frequently used will kind of fall to the wayside, and the stuff that people really need sort of gets prioritized, and the whole thing comes into focus. Like a little blurry comes into focus.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. That's how I'm feeling at the very least. And again, does that make it a perfect user experience for people on day one? No, but but you also have the experience of being one of the first people to test it. And if you have problems, send them to Apple, support.apple.com, or if you're a developer, bugreport.apple.com. People listen to this. Radar.
And I would think that even like, so I think this is a complicated thing, because I think the more you want to do, the more you're frustrated, but the more you can work around with the Apple TV. So people like you and I are going to get it because, and we know what the potential is. So we're a little frustrated we can't get to it, but we've been using it so long, we kind of naturally figure out ways of getting around it. But I think like I bought 5 of them so far, one for me, and I'm going to give them to my sister, my mom, my father, my brother. I'm going to give them to my entire family. And I don't think they're going to have a lot of this frustration, because they'll log into something once. They'll log into one account. And it'll be a little bit frustrating at first, but then once it's set up, they're not going to touch it for a year, and they'll just be using Siri, and they'll be using like the Siri remote, and it'll be a fantastic experience for them. And I think it'll be a better one than they had with the previous Apple TV,
For
which
the
they
third
all
generation,
have.
absolutely.
Yeah, so I think that if you are sort of the kind of person who wants all the little tiny details done now, you'll be a little bit frustrated. But I think if you fall on either end of the spectrum, you'll just be happy to have it, or you'll be smart enough to figure out what you want to do anyway.
Yeah, and then once the other stuff comes in, it'll be, again, part of it will be a finally, but also part of it will be like, oh, cool, this can do this now? I didn't know. This is so awesome. So before we close today, we had a couple of Ask iMores, so I want to address those. Let's see. So Nathan Zarek was asking about our feelings on the swipe to highlight an icon versus the more accurate click, click, click of the old remote. He's like, I'm always undershooting or overshooting what I want. Now, Nathan, I generally like the swipe. Actually, for me, I find that it doesn't swipe far enough because I like on my iMac, I like a very, very quick trackpad. I believe, is there a switch? I know there's a switch for the click hardness, but do you know if there's a preference setting for swipe speed?
There might be. I don't remember offhand. I don't want to give any, but we'll double check that. And we're doing a whole long thing on accessibility and settings, and we'll have all that in there.
Yeah, awesome. But yeah, I tend to find that pretty well. And also, Nathan, if you have a 3rd generation Apple TV, the silver remote works flawlessly with the 4th generation Apple TV. And you can use the click, click, click if you'd prefer for navigating, and then the Siri remote for special things. I know that's multiple remotes, but there are options. Steve C wants to know is it worth the upgrade yet, or wait until next year when more apps are better developed? Again, we've been talking about this kind of the whole hour, but I think it depends on your, what you want to do with. If you're just using it basically the same way you use your 3rd generation Apple TV, and you want to play some games or experiment with, fitness or kitchenware, I think you've got a good foundation to play with. I think it's worth the money.
I agree.
Yep. Jeff Roy is not a question, but I'm surprised that the new Apple TV remote doesn't have a ping locator via Apple Watch or iPhone. I agree. I think it's lame. It has Bluetooth. It should be able to have Find My Remote. And I don't understand why we couldn't have put like a minuscule speaker that just makes a ee noise. Because yes, it is a tiny black thing. And so far I've had good luck not losing it in my couch cushions, but I have deep feelings.
Yeah, I bought an extra just in case.
Yes. Doug Harper wants to know any word on Plex. And yes, we've talked to the developers of Plex. They are actively working on an app for the Apple TV. So expect to see that soon. I'll let you handle this one, Renee. Michael Crosby wants to know, will 32 gigabytes of Apple TV be enough to do app thinning on device limitations for storage?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of misconceptions about this stuff. App thinning is 3 things. App thinning is the on-demand resources, the bit code, and the app slicing. App slicing doesn't apply because they're unique binaries, so they're pre-sliced. So what you really have is on-demand resources, because bit code is transparent, like doesn't matter to the end user. So on-demand resources means that what it's going to do is just download stuff, let you keep it on the device, and then when you start to run out of storage, it'll delete the oldest, least frequently used stuff to make room for the newest, most frequently used stuff. Because nobody wants, oh, you're out of room on your on your Apple TV, please go delete some apps or content so we can download something new, because that's not a good living room experience. So the difference here is if you have a very high-speed internet connection, you'll be fine with 32 gigabytes because all your data is saved. So where you are in every level and every app, all that stuff is all saved. It just moves stuff off the box to the cloud and then moves it back down again. If you don't have a very good internet connection, you'll be waiting a long time for that stuff to happen. So if you go for 64, treat it like cache. It just means that you have much more cache available. So more movies, more TV shows, more games, more apps will stay on the device, and you won't have to try to re-download them again.
Yeah, I will say my dev unit is 32 gigabytes, and I have something like 40 apps installed on it right now, and I'm not in any danger of losing any space. So I think if you want some sort of like a test the waters, stick your toe in, like do a little bit of a make some ripples. I think it's a good starter. And you have 14 days. So if you find that it's not working out for you, and you have 14 days to return it and upgrade. Pritesh, I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher your last name. Pritesh Pistakia wants to know if home sharing via iTunes is going to be available. Yes, it is the app labeled computers. When you click on it, it will ask you to set up home sharing and log in. And once you do, you should have access to any Mac that has home sharing turned on with your Apple ID.
And why there's no Siri with home sharing is that you cannot imagine the metadata nightmare that is everybody's different library. Search for this title when this title is moved _3 _. Yeah, it's a huge problem set to solve. So that probably won't be coming soon.
Do you know if home sharing is available in the regular search app? Because I think that might be an omission that could be fixed with a little less terrifying metadata problems.
Yeah, I don't think so, but maybe. But right now, Apple just kind of dumps you into that library list. And I forget there's Simplex or an app that's very Plex-like that handles that better. I'll find the name and we'll put it up.
Awesome. Yep. So that's all the questions that we have on Twitter today. Before we go, Rene, do we want to mention very quickly iPad Pro, non-living room things?
Soon. Maybe we'll defer that to next week.
Yeah. It's the iPad Pro is coming. We're going to talk a lot about it. I have feelings. Yes. I have such feelings.
So many feelings.
So many feelings. Yeah. So we'll talk about that very soon.
All right. So in the meantime, I want to once again thank Enterprise. Sorry, I was going to say Enterprise. Well, it might as well be. I want to once again thank Red Hat for sponsoring this show. Enterprise open source software trusted in the world's most demanding data centers, from the trading floors of the New York Stock Exchange to the animation studios at DreamWorks. Red Hat lets enterprise large and small tap into the remarkable innovation of open source without the risk of doing it all themselves. Red Hat, different for the sake of better technology. Find out more at redhat.com. Serenity, thank you so much. If people want to find you on the interwebs, where can they go?
They can go to Settern, SETTERN, on Twitter and Instagram, as well as on iMore.com and theincomparable.com. Our radio theater productions were airing season 1. Tune in. I believe we just finished a 2-parter from the Two-Fisted Tales of Tesla. We're going to do a really, really fun episode 7 that's coming out this week. So stay tuned.
And you can find me at Rene Ritchie. You can find all of us at iMore. You can find the audio for this show on iTunes. Just look for the iMore show. And you can find the video on YouTube. If you want to watch that on your Apple TV, download the YouTube app, look for the iMore show. We will be right there for you in full-fledged living color. Well, recorded color. Thank you so much, Ren.
Thank you, Rene.
And thank you, everybody, for listening.
Yeah, and if you have more questions on the Apple TV, stay tuned to iMore.com. We'll have tons of coverage, and you can always ping us on Twitter.
So much coverage, all of it.
Writing all day.
All right.
Write every day like you're running out of time. Goodbye.